Hello there, media critique sheep followers. This is Borderline Latina, and I am taking over. I talk about a variety of different things within the fields of mental health, sexuality, social justice, and many more. And as always, it is unscripted yet informed by education, training, professional, and life experiences, just to legitimize things. Anywho, let's get started. Let's get it. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about whitesplaining. Yep, whitesplaining. The term that I cannot remember it not being in my life is such a small but significant term that explains a lot of experiences for myself and others alike. Almost kind of like a song. On the 5th day of Christmas, my fake allies gave to me whitesplaining thoughts and prayers, back in compliments to fake tears and a false sense of security. That was an excerpt from the 12 Days of Fake Allyship, available now on the TikTok. Anyway, let's get back. What does that term mean, whitesplaining? Well, for those of you who are not familiar with the term, it explains when the white folk give out information or explain topics to an audience of people who already know about it because it's based on their own life experiences. Seems kind of redundant. And, ever since I learned about this term, which probably was within the past 10 years, I've been racking my brain because, yes, here's a term that explains what I've gone through in many different social and professional and academic environments, but I often think to myself, why does this happen? And so let's take aside from the, kind of obvious person being really mean and not thoughtful about your life experiences, so they feel like they need to tell you, like from a very paternalistic expectation of, well, you don't know about your experiences, so I'm gonna tell you. There's a lot of people that fall into that category, but what I'm thinking about or want to focus on is particularly the types of people who are well-intentioned, although still making this mistake. People who want to bond with people, but they do such a bad job out of it. Bless their heart. That's a term that I like using from the South. It's very snarky. It's bless your heart, but really, bless your heart. Anywho, what motivates people to share that information? So here's an example from my personal life. When people learn about my specific ethnicities, some people may feel compelled to explain the history of my culture and ethnicity to me as if I've never heard about it or grew up in that culture. That seems like a social no-no and a kind of obvious one, but clearly this person doesn't even realize that they're doing it or understand why this may be awkward and or problematic. Why are you explaining something to me that I already know because I lived through it? And then I started to get to thinking, how do people bond with each other? Across cultures, that looks different. People can bond with each other by sharing lived experiences. So if there's a lot of commonalities between people in terms of places that they've been, where they grew up, hobbies that they share, values that they have, they build upon that and they bond with each other. New people bond with each other. Now, we've definitely had instances of whitesplaining in situations where the person maybe doesn't know the other person well and they're trying to get to know each other, but it can also happen in situations where people have known each other for years and they're still doing about that. And that could be a whole nother episode on itself. But I want to focus on the particular situations where maybe it's an acquaintance or maybe it's someone that you're just starting to get to know, and this person, this white person, really wants to make a good impression on you. And in my experiences, it seems like for some people, not all, but some people may fall into the trap of whitesplaining because they use the concept of giving out information as a way to bond. Sharing information that you've learned as a way to build up your social capital and to bond with people. This person may think that I'm an interesting person because I have knowledge about a particular subject that falls within maybe that other person's knowledge base, or in this case, their identity. So, not me, but as a white person, maybe wanting to share information about what they learn about that person's culture as a way to be like, this person's down, they understand me because they're able to spit out details about their culture. And while that is well intentioned, that is still patronizing and paternalistic to feel the need to give out information about someone's culture and where they've lived. But I say this because I've seen this many times. And one time stands out in particular, and this was amongst white folks. Someone from one European country talking to another person who's a descendant from a European country. And that descendant of the European country felt like they wanted to bond with the European person by giving details about where that person is from. But clearly that person understands because they lived there, they were born there, and they grew up there, and now they're living in the United States. They don't need an American to tell them about their country. Or the fact that that person went there and lived there and was able to describe the different types of neighborhoods and maybe the economic structure. It doesn't make any sense. But that is how people bond. And so I wonder if, maybe this isn't a solution because I hardly see this problem going away, but I wonder if it boils down to how people are trying to build connections with others. And I am not condoning this, because this is still a mistake, and it's still going to be a mistake, and it needs to be something that needs to stop. But in terms of understanding why this happened, it might be a nervousness, and I think I've seen this and heard this from people, this nervousness of like, I have someone here that's different from me, and I'm assuming that they don't have other identities that are shared, other hobbies or interests or values. That's a leap, that's a gross generalization. So I'm gonna bond by sharing information. And yes, I think for a lot of people in the majority culture, it's very easy for them to bond with other people in the majority culture because all their identities are visible and out there, or that's the assumed thing. So I can bond in the fact that if I'm a white person with another white person, chances are that we probably will have an overlap in the type of values we're being taught and type of neighborhoods we're being taught, our faith, our religion, our value systems in terms of raising kids, etc., etc., etc. Once again, in overgeneralization, but oftentimes can work out to that person. If I'm living in this area and a new person comes in my area and they look like me and they have some shared identities, we can bond. What happens if there's a new person in town who looks different? Do I jump to the conclusion that in order to bond with them, I need to read up on their culture or tell them about their culture because they'll be impressed with how much I know about them? I can understand wanting to impress someone by showing that you understand their culture, but maybe not sharing that with them. And allowing that person to warm up. And hey, just because they look different to you doesn't mean that they don't share some things in common. We don't know. So, whitesplaining, although it is hurtful yet hilarious sometimes, doesn't fly well in, I was going to say most every instances. But it might be helpful for those who are prone to falling in that trap to take a step back to figure out what motivates you to do that in the first place, and then challenge it and see what's actually underneath. Is it nervousness? Is it the fear of not being understood, or just thinking that there's nothing to talk about? If that's the case, maybe doing some exploring and just coming from a genuine perspective and not feeling like you have to give out information to bond. Who knows? Chances are you might learn a little something. But that's just my take about whitesplaining. And maybe I should really release that song. But until then, I bid y'all adieu, and until another time. This has been Borderline Latina Takes Over.